My name is Ariel, and I'm 29 years old. When my ex-husband threw me out with nothing but a cardboard box, he laughed and said my dead father had left me useless junk. Inside that box was an old bank card he was certain had maybe $10 on it. The next morning, I walked into a bank just hoping for enough to survive the week. What I didn't know was that sliding that card across the counter would set off alarms that would change my life forever and put me in more danger than I ever imagined. The bank manager's face went white, and she pulled me into a private room with one urgent whisper. Please sit down. Your father was not who you think he was. If you're watching this story unfold, I'd love to know where you're joining me from, and hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about hidden truths and the dangerous secrets families keep. The grocery bags cut into my palms as I climbed the last flight of stairs to our apartment. Our apartment. I still called it that, even though Derek had been making it clear for months that nothing about our life together was ours anymore. I fumbled with my keys, juggling 2 bags of groceries against my hip, when I noticed something odd. The hallway looked different. Cluttered. As I got closer, my heart started pounding. Clothes. Books. My things. Scattered across the dingy carpet like trash someone had dumped without a second thought. My favorite blue sweater lay crumpled near the stairs. The photo album my grandmother gave me sat face down by the wall, its spine cracked. I dropped the grocery bags, and a can of soup rolled away, echoing down the empty hallway. Derek. My voice came out smaller than I intended. The apartment door swung open, and there he stood, leaning against the frame with that smirk I'd grown to hate. The one that said he knew exactly how much power he had in this moment, and he was going to enjoy every second of it. You're done, Ariel. His voice was loud, theatrical, meant for the neighbors who I knew were listening behind their doors. Take that trash your dead dad left. It's all you've got. My chest tightened. He'd mentioned my father. Dad had been gone for 8 months, and Derek knew how raw that wound still was. He knew, and he was pressing on it deliberately. Derek, please. Can we just talk inside? Like adults. I hated how my voice shook, hated that I was begging. Adults. He laughed, a harsh bark that made me flinch. Adults don't mooch off their husbands for years. Adults don't cling to dead people's junk like it means something. I tried to step forward, to gather my belongings with whatever dignity I had left, but then she appeared. Melissa, Derek's coworker, who had been texting him at all hours for the past 6 months. She stepped out from behind him, wearing one of my old band shirts, the Fleetwood Mac one I'd been looking for last week. She looked me up and down with something between pity and contempt. He doesn't want you, she said simply, flatly, like she was stating a fact as obvious as the weather. Move on. The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, frozen, as Derek bent down and picked up a small cardboard box I hadn't noticed. He shoved it against my chest hard enough that I stumbled back a step. Here. Your inheritance. He practically spat the word. An old wallet, some rusty key, and a bank card that probably has $10 on it. Enjoy your fortune, princess. The door slammed in my face. I stood there for a long moment, holding that box, surrounded by my scattered life. A neighbor's door clicked shut quietly. Someone had been watching. Of course they had. Derek had made sure of that. My legs felt weak as I sank down onto the floor, right there in the hallway. The box sat in my lap, and with trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was my father's old leather wallet, worn soft from years in his back pocket. A metal key that looked too old to open anything modern. And a bank card, scratched and faded, with my father's initials barely visible on the surface. I remember my father's last words to me, whispered in that sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and dying flowers. His hand had been so frail in mine, his voice barely audible. One day, Ariel, you'll know why I left this. When you're ready. I hadn't understood then. I still didn't understand now. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Mom. Maybe she'd help. Maybe she'd let me stay with her for a few days while I figured things out. I answered on the second ring. Mom, I told you Derek was trouble. Her voice was cold, distant, the same tone she'd used when I told her I was getting married. You didn't listen. Now you deal with it. Mom, please, The line went dead. I sat there in that hallway for another 20 minutes before I could make myself move. When I finally did, it was to stuff as much as I could into my old suitcase, leaving behind the things that wouldn't fit. Photos. Books. Little pieces of my life that Derek had thrown away like garbage. The motel I found was the kind that rented by the hour and didn't ask questions. The sheets smelled like bleach and cigarette smoke. The TV had 3 working channels. It cost $42 for the night, which left me with $83 in my checking account. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress and emptied the cardboard box onto the floral bedspread. The wallet. The key. The card. That was it. That was my inheritance from a father who had worked himself to death at a mechanic shop, who had always said he was sorry he couldn't give me more. I opened the wallet carefully, like it might fall apart in my hands. Inside, tucked behind where his driver's license used to be, was a small piece of paper, folded many times. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The handwriting was Dad's, unmistakable, the same scrawl that used to write me notes in my school lunches. When you're ready to know the truth, check the balance first. I read it 3 times. 4. The words didn't make sense. What truth? What balance? The card probably had nothing on it. Derek was right about that, at least. Dad had died with medical bills he couldn't pay in a rental house with furniture older than I was. But something about that note sent electricity through my exhausted body. Why would he write this? Why would he hide a note in a wallet and tell me, with his dying breath, that I'd understand one day? I turned the bank card over in my hands. It was old, the magnetic stripe barely visible. The bank logo was from a branch I'd never been to, in the nicer part of town where Dad and I never had reason to go. Despite the exhaustion pulling at every muscle, despite the humiliation still burning in my chest, despite everything, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Curiosity. Purpose. Maybe even hope. I set my phone alarm for 7 in the morning. The bank opened at 9. I'd be there when the doors unlocked. I fell asleep clutching that card in my hand, my father's cryptic message playing on repeat in my mind. When you're ready to know the truth. Maybe I was ready. Maybe I had no choice but to be ready. Tomorrow, I'd find out what my father had been trying to tell me. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's smirking face, heard Melissa's cold dismissal, felt my mother's indifference through the phone line. By 6:30, I gave up and took a shower in the motel's tiny bathroom, where the water pressure was weak and the temperature couldn't decide between scalding and freezing. The face looking back at me in the foggy mirror was a stranger's. Dark circles under red-rimmed eyes. Hair that needed washing again already. The kind of exhausted, defeated expression I'd seen on other women and promised myself I'd never wear. I got dressed in the cleanest clothes I could find from my suitcase, a pair of jeans and a sweater that was only slightly wrinkled. Professional enough for a bank, I hoped. I tied my hair back, took a breath, and picked up the card. The bank was in the nice part of town, where the sidewalks were clean and the storefronts had fresh paint. I felt out of place immediately, too aware of my worn shoes and yesterday's mascara. A woman in a business suit walked past me without a glance, talking rapidly into her phone about quarterly reports. The bank's glass doors were heavy, the kind that whispered money as they closed behind you. Inside, everything was cream marble and soft lighting. Classical music played quietly overhead. A few customers sat in the waiting area, checking their phones or reading newspapers. I approached the counter, where a young teller with carefully styled hair and a name tag that read Mason was organizing a stack of brochures. He looked up with a practiced customer service smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good morning. How can I help you today? I need to check the balance on an account." My voice sounded too quiet, too uncertain. I cleared my throat. "On this card." I slid my father's card across the counter. Mason glanced at it, then at me, and picked it up with the casual disinterest of someone who'd processed 1,000 transactions before breakfast. "Sure, no problem. Can I get your ID as well?" I fumbled for my driver's license, hands shaking slightly. He took it, compared the names, and turned to his computer. I watched him slide the card into the reader, expecting him to tell me what I already knew. Empty account. Closed account. $10.73. The computer beeped. Not a normal beep. A sharp, urgent sound that made Mason's casual expression falter. A red alert flashed across his screen, bright enough that I could see the reflection in his glasses. What the? He trailed off, staring at the screen. Is something wrong? My heart started pounding. Mason didn't answer. He ran the card again, slower this time, like he thought he'd made a mistake. The beep came again, louder, more insistent. The red alert pulsed. His face had gone pale. I need to, just one moment, please. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, and walked quickly toward the back offices. Not ran, exactly, but close. I saw him disappear through a door marked management. The other customers were looking now. An older man in a suit. A woman with her toddler. The security guard by the door. All of them staring at me like I'd pulled a weapon instead of a bank card. My mouth went dry. Had Dad done something illegal? Was I about to be arrested? The seconds dragged into a minute, then two. I thought about running, actually considered it, but my legs felt like concrete. Then a woman emerged from the back offices, walking with quick, purposeful steps. She was maybe 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes behind thin-framed glasses. She carried a manila folder and a printout, and her expression was impossible to read. Ms. Dawson? Her voice was quiet but firm. Yes, I'm Rowena Clark, branch manager. Would you please come with me? It wasn't really a question. I followed her past the teller stations, past curious stares, into a private office with frosted glass walls. She closed the door and gestured to a leather chair. Please sit down.
Iset.
My hands twisted together in my lap. Ms. Clark placed the folder on her desk but didn't open it yet. Instead, she looked at me with an expression that might have been concern or might have been something else entirely. Ms. Dawson, I need you to stay calm. You're not in any trouble. Then why did? The card you presented belonged to your father, Michael Dawson. Is that correct?
Yes.
He died 8 months ago. She nodded slowly, like she was choosing her next words very carefully. The account attached to this card has been dormant for several years. It was designed to activate only when accessed by the designated beneficiary. She paused. You. I don't understand. My father worked at a mechanic shop. He barely had enough to. Ms. Dawson. She turned the computer monitor toward me. This is the current balance of the account. I looked at the screen. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Numbers. Too many numbers.
More zeros than made sense.
I blinked, certain it was a mistake, a glitch, the wrong account. That can't be right. I assure you it is. Ms. Clark's voice was gentle but serious. Your father was not who you thought he was. And this account has been waiting for you. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the arms of a chair. How much is that?
She told me.
The number didn't make sense. It was the kind of money people won in lotteries. The kind of money that came with mansions and yachts and private jets. Not the kind of money that came from fixing cars and living in rental houses. There's been a mistake. I heard myself saying. My father died broke. He had medical bills. He left me nothing but that card and a key, and he left you considerably more than that. Ms. Clark opened the folder. But right now, I need you to follow me somewhere more secure. There are things you need to see, and this office isn't private enough. What things? Information your father left specifically for you. Documents he wanted you to have when you access this account. She stood. Please, Ms. Dawson. This is important. I followed her on numb legs, through a different door, down a hallway I hadn't known existed, to a small room with no windows and a heavy door that locked behind us. A security room. Ms. Clark placed a thick binder on the table between us. The cover was plain except for a label in typed letters. For Ariel Dawson, to be released upon account activation. My father's words echoed in my head. When you're ready to know the truth. This was the truth. Whatever was in that binder. I reached for it with shaking hands. The binder was heavy, the kind meant to last, to protect important documents. My name stared back at me from the cover, typed on a label that had yellowed slightly with age. How long had this been waiting? How long had my father known I'd end up here, desperate and alone, seeking answers? Take your time, Ms. Clark said softly. She'd pulled up a chair beside me but kept a respectful distance, like she understood I needed space to process whatever I was about to discover. I opened the cover. The first page was a letter, handwritten in my father's familiar scrawl. Seeing his handwriting again, after 8 months of him being gone, hit me like a physical blow. I had to blink back tears before I could focus enough to read. My dearest Ariel, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've activated the account. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. I'm sorry for all the lies I told you, all the truths I kept hidden. I did it to protect you, though I know that's small comfort now. Everything in this binder is yours. Everything I built, everything I owned, every secret I kept, it all belongs to you. But with it comes danger, sweetheart. The same danger that made me hide all of this in the first place. Trust no one until you have the full picture. Read everything. Understand everything. Only then will you know who your real allies are. I love you. I always have. I'm so proud of the woman you've become, even though I won't be there to tell you in person. Be careful.
Dad.
My hands were shaking so badly, I had to set the letter down. Trust no one.
Danger. What had my father been involved in?
I flipped to the next page and found photographs. My father, but not the version I knew. Not the man in oil-stained coveralls who came home exhausted every night. This man wore expensive suits and stood in boardrooms with other men in expensive suits. He shook hands with people I didn't recognize, smiled for cameras at events I'd never heard of. Who is this? I whispered, though I knew the answer. It was him. It was my father. Ms. Clark leaned forward slightly. Your father was a silent partner in a major infrastructure development company, Dawson Meridian Engineering. They built bridges, highways, energy grids across the country and internationally. That's impossible. He was a mechanic. That was his cover, his way of staying off the radar. She pointed to one of the photographs, where my father stood next to a tall man with silver hair. That's Richard Meridian, his business partner. They founded the company together 23 years ago. 23 years. I was 6 years old then, just starting first grade, living in our small rental house with a leaky roof. While I ate generic cereal and wore hand-me-down clothes, my father had been building an empire. I turned the page and found financial documents, contracts, stock certificates, all of them bearing my father's signature and mine. My name, typed beside his, on documents dated years ago. Some from when I was a child. Some from when I was a teenager. He put everything in a trust under your name, Ms. Clark explained. For tax purposes, yes, but primarily for protection. If anything happened to him, if anyone came looking, the assets wouldn't be traced back to him. They'd be traced to you, and you were just a child. Invisible. Protection from what? But even as I asked, I remembered the letter.
Danger.
The same danger. I kept flipping through pages, my mind struggling to absorb the information. Property deeds. Investment portfolios. Patent ownerships. The numbers were staggering. Every page revealed another layer of wealth, another secret life my father had lived while pretending to be someone ordinary.
And then I found the timeline.
It was a handwritten document, page after page of dates and events, chronicled in my father's neat printing. Every time he'd worked late, every business trip he'd taken, every lie he'd told me about where he was going and why. All of it laid bare, explained, contextualized. The time he said he was at a mechanics conference in Detroit, he'd actually been in Dubai, negotiating a contract for a bridge project. The weeks he claimed he was helping a friend open a shop in Texas, he'd been in meetings with government officials about infrastructure development. The late nights at the garage had been late nights at corporate offices, reviewing bids and signing deals. My entire childhood had been a carefully constructed fiction. Why? The word came out broken. Why live like we did if he had all this? Ms. Clark's expression was sad. because people tried to target him. There were threats, attempts to extort him, to force him into deals he didn't want. He realized that the only way to protect you and himself was to disappear into obscurity. The mechanic shop was real. He bought it, worked there, built a reputation. But it was camouflage. I found another envelope, this one sealed with tape that had yellowed over time. My name was written across the front in marker. Urgent. Read carefully. Inside was another letter, shorter this time, more frantic in its handwriting.
Ariel?
If you're reading this after everything else, you're ready for the full truth. Not everyone around you is who they seem. I've included a list of names, people who cannot be trusted, people who are connected to the threats I faced, people who might try to use you. Your mother is on this list.
I'm sorry.
She knew about the money, and she resented me for hiding it from her. When we divorced, she tried to claim half of everything, but the lawyers shut her down because technically, you owned it all. She's never forgiven either of us. There are others on this list. Study it carefully. And Ariel, the key I left you. It opens another vault. A private one, separate from the bank system. You'll need to find it. The location is in the documents, coded. When you do, you'll understand why I had to hide so much. I love you, sweetheart. Be safe.
Dad.
My hands trembled as I pulled out the list. It was typed clinical, just names and brief descriptions. Margaret Dawson, ex-wife/your mother, resentful of financial arrangements. Not violent, but not trustworthy. Has connection to individuals seeking information. Victor Hargrove, Margaret's current partner. Corporate consultant. Previously worked with rival firms. Possible connection to threats. And then near the bottom of the list, a name that made my blood run cold. Derek Morrison, potential future connection to Ariel. Stepson of Victor Hargrove. If he enters Ariel's life, extreme caution advised. Maybe planted. The document was dated 5 years ago. 1 year before I met Derek at that coffee shop, where he'd seemed so charming, so accidental, so perfect.
No.
I pushed back from the table, the chair scraping loudly. No, that's not. He couldn't have. But my father's words stared back at me. Maybe planted. Miss Clark was watching me carefully. Ms. Dawson, what is it? Derek. I could barely get the name out. Derek Morrison. He's my ex-husband. He just threw me out yesterday. Her face went pale. He's on the list? I showed her. She read it, and I watched her expression shift from concern to alarm. Ms. Dawson, the key your father left you. Do you still have it? I thought of the cardboard box, the metal key inside.
Yes.
It's at the motel where I'm staying. We need to get it.
Now.
She stood quickly. That key opens a vault only you can access. If Derek is connected to the people your father feared, and if he knows you've activated this account. She didn't need to finish. I understood. Derek wasn't just a bad husband. He was part of something bigger. Part of the danger my father had warned me about. And I'd just shown him exactly where I was vulnerable. Ms. Clark drove me back to the motel in her own car, a sleek sedan that felt absurdly luxurious compared to my current situation. She drove fast but carefully, checking her mirrors more often than seemed necessary. I found myself doing the same, looking for black SUVs, for Derek's beat-up truck, for anything that seemed wrong. Tell me about the vault, I said, needing to fill the tense silence. It's a private facility, completely separate from the bank system. High security, the kind typically used by people who need extreme confidentiality. Government officials, witnesses in federal cases, people with sensitive materials. She glanced at me. Your father paid for a 50-year lease on his vault space. It requires 3 forms of identification to access: the key, an iris scan, and a security code. I don't know any security code. It'll be in the documents. Your father wouldn't have left you without all the pieces. The motel looked shabbier in daylight than it had last night. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a few cars that looked like they'd been there for days. I directed Ms. Clark to my room on the 2nd floor. I unlocked the door, and immediately, something felt wrong. The room was exactly as I'd left it. My suitcase still open on the floor. The TV still off. The cardboard box still sitting on the nightstand where I'd left it before going to the bank. But the air felt different. Disturbed. "Stay here," Miss Clark said quietly, her hand on my arm. She stepped inside first, checking the bathroom, looking under the bed, opening the closet.
When she seemed satisfied, she nodded.
"Okay."
I went straight to the nightstand, to the box.
The wallet was still there. The bank card was in my pocket. But when I looked for the key, "It's gone." My voice came out flat, shocked. "The key is gone." Ms. Clark was beside me instantly, looking into the box, then around the room. "Are you certain you left it here?"
Yes.
"I'm sure. I took the card with me but left the key because I didn't know what it was for yet." My mind raced. The door was locked. I locked it myself. How did? Check the window. I went to the window and found it unlatched, pushed open just a crack. Just enough for someone to reach through and unlock it from the inside. Just enough for someone to climb through. "Derek," I whispered. "He must have followed me yesterday. He must have known. We need to leave."
Now.
Miss Clark was already moving toward the door. "If he has the key, he'll try to use it. But he can't access the vault without you. He needs your iris scan." We were halfway to the door when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I have what your father left.
The key.
The answers. If you want to know what's really in that vault, meet me. You know where. Come alone." It wasn't signed, but I knew Derek's way of writing. Terse. Demanding. The false intimacy of you know where. He meant the parking garage where we'd had our first kiss, where he'd proposed, where he knew I'd remember. "He's baiting me," I said, showing Miss Clark the phone. "Which means he's desperate. He needs you to access the vault." She started typing rapidly on her own phone. "I'm calling our security team. We're going to the vault facility now, and we're going to beat him there." The vault facility was on the other side of town, in an unmarked building that looked like a law office from the outside. Ms. Clark pulled into an underground garage, where a security officer checked her credentials before letting us proceed to a private elevator. How do you know he won't follow us here?" I asked as the elevator descended. "Because very few people know this place exists, and even fewer know the location. Your father chose this facility specifically because of its discretion." She looked at me. "But we need to move quickly. If Derek has connections to the people your father feared, he might have resources we don't anticipate." The elevator opened into a concrete corridor, sterile and cold, lit by fluorescent lights. Another security checkpoint. This time, Ms. Clark handed over documents, and I was asked to present my ID and state my name. The security officer, a woman with military bearing and a no-nonsense expression, reviewed everything twice before nodding. "Miss Dawson, I'll need your iris scan." I leaned forward into a machine that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie. A blue light scanned my eyes, and somewhere a computer beeped its approval. "And the key?" My stomach dropped. It was stolen. But I know I'm supposed to have access. The officer held up a hand. "Backup protocol. We'll need 3 additional forms of verification." Your father anticipated this possibility. She produced a tablet. "Answer these questions. They're personal, things only you would know." The questions were strange, specific. What was the name of my childhood dog? What street did we live on when I was 7? What was the last meal my father cooked for me before he went into the hospital? I answered them all, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. The officer nodded after each one. "Security code?" I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I'd taken of my father's documents. There, hidden in a paragraph about investment strategies, was a string of numbers that didn't fit the context. I read them aloud. Another beep. Another approval. "Welcome, Miss Dawson. Vault 47. We walked down another corridor, this one lined with heavy metal doors, each with a number, but no other identifying features. At door 47, the officer used her own key, then stepped back. "You'll need to enter alone. It's protocol." Ms. Clark squeezed my arm gently. "We'll be right here." I stepped inside. The vault was smaller than I expected, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with gray walls and a single light overhead. In the center of the room sat a black metal box, about the size of a briefcase, with my name engraved on a silver plate on top. I approached it slowly, almost afraid to touch it. This was what my father had hidden. This was the truth he'd kept locked away. I lifted the lid. Inside were hard drives, the kind used for storing massive amounts of data. USB sticks. Folders thick with documents. And photographs, dozens of them, showing my father with a man I didn't recognize. They were standing in front of a construction site, both wearing hard hats, both smiling like they'd just accomplished something significant. There was a newspaper clipping, yellowed and fragile, with a headline that made my breath catch.
Prominent engineer dies in suspicious accident, authorities investigating.
The article was about Richard Meridian, my father's business partner. The accident had happened 8 years ago. The investigation had been closed with no charges filed. But someone had written in the margin, in my father's handwriting, "Not an accident. They killed him." My hands shook as I picked up a sealed envelope, this one marked with red letters. "Urgent, read first." I tore it open.
Ariel?
Richard didn't die in an accident. He was murdered because he was about to go public with information about corruption in the company, bribes, falsified safety reports, contracts awarded to the lowest bidder regardless of risk. I have the evidence. It's on these drives. Emails, financial records, audio recordings. Everything Richard gathered before they killed him. I kept quiet because I was afraid. Afraid they'd come after me. Afraid they'd come after you. But by keeping quiet, I let them get away with it. I let them continue hurting people, cutting corners, building infrastructure that could fail and kill thousands. I'm giving you a choice I never gave myself. You can take this evidence and bury it, protect yourself, live the quiet life I always wanted for you. Or you can do what Richard and I should have done years ago. You can expose them. If you choose that path, know that it will be dangerous. These people have money, power, connections. They've already killed once. They won't hesitate to do it again.
But you'll also have resources now.
Money, protection, lawyers who can't be bought. You won't be facing this alone. Whatever you choose, I'll understand. And I'll love you, Dad. I stood there in that vault, surrounded by evidence of conspiracy and murder, holding my father's final letter, and I understood everything. Derek wasn't just my ex-husband. He was a plant, someone sent to get close to me, to find out if I knew anything about my father's secrets. And when the account activated, when I walked into that bank with my father's card, I'd sent up a flare to everyone who'd been waiting for this moment. They knew I had the evidence now, and they'd do anything to get it back. I gathered the drives, the documents, all of it, and placed everything carefully back in the box. Then I carried it out of the vault, into the corridor where Ms. Clark waited. "We need to call the police," I said.
No.
Better than that. "We need to call the FBI." Ms. Clark looked at the box in my arms, then at my face, and she smiled. A small, proud smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." Ms. Clark carried the black box while I followed close behind, my mind still reeling from everything I'd just discovered. Murder. Conspiracy. Evidence that could bring down powerful people. My father hadn't just left me money. He left me a weapon. We walked through the stark corridor toward the elevator, our footsteps echoing off concrete walls. The security officer nodded as we passed, her expression neutral, professional. But I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. I wasn't just Ariel Dawson anymore, the woman whose husband had thrown her out. I was the daughter of Michael Dawson, the man who'd kept secrets that people had killed for. The elevator doors opened, and we stepped inside. Ms. Clark pressed the button for the parking garage, and as the doors slid shut, she finally spoke. "What did you find?" "Evidence." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Evidence that my father's business partner was murdered. Evidence of corruption, bribery, falsified safety reports. Everything. Her jaw tightened. "And you want to go to the authorities, don't you?" She met my eyes.
Yes.
"But I need you to understand what that means. These people have already killed once. They won't hesitate to silence you if they think you're a threat." The elevator opened into the underground parking garage. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across rows of vehicles. Miss Clark's sedan sat where we'd left it, but something made me pause. The air felt wrong.
Too still. Too quiet.
Miss Clark. A black SUV with tinted windows sat 3 spaces down, engine running. I hadn't noticed it before. Neither had Miss Clark, judging by the way her hand suddenly gripped my arm. "Walk normally," she whispered. "Get to the car. Don't run." We moved toward her sedan, and the SUV's engine revved slightly. Not pulling out. Just waiting. Watching. Ms. Clark unlocked the car with shaking hands. I slid into the passenger seat, clutching the box to my chest like armor. She started the engine, backed out carefully, professionally. The SUV didn't move. Until we did. As soon as we pulled toward the exit, the SUV followed. Not aggressively. Just close enough to make its presence known. Close enough to send a message. "They're following us," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I see them." Ms. Clark's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. She pulled out onto the street, merged into traffic. The SUV stayed 3 cars back, patient, methodical. "What do? We don't go to your motel. We don't go to my house. We go somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses." She was already reaching for her phone, pressing speed dial with one hand while steering with the other. "I'm calling the security team from the bank. They'll meet us." I turned to look through the back window. The SUV was still there, maintaining its distance. Professional. Practiced. These weren't amateurs. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from the unknown number. "You can't run forever. We know you have it. Give us what's ours, and we'll let you walk away." My hands trembled as I showed Ms. Clark the message. "They're bluffing," she said, but I heard the uncertainty in her voice. "They won't do anything in broad daylight, not with witnesses." But even as she said it, I remembered my father's letter. They killed Richard. They could kill again. We drove for 20 minutes, taking random turns, doubling back, until Ms. Clark seemed satisfied we'd lost the SUV. She pulled into a busy shopping center parking lot and found a spot near the entrance where families walked by with shopping bags and strollers. "We wait here," she said. "The security team is 10 minutes out." I looked down at the box in my lap, at the evidence that had cost Richard Meridian his life. "Miss Clark, why are you helping me? You could just walk away. This isn't your fight." She turned to face me, and I saw something fierce in her expression. "Your father saved my nephew's life once. A construction site accident, back when your father was still working in the field. A beam collapsed, and your father pulled my nephew out seconds before the whole structure came down. He never asked for recognition, never made a big deal of it. Just did it because it was the right thing to do." She paused. "He was a good man. And if these people killed his partner and scared him into hiding, then they need to answer for that. So yes, this is my fight too." I blinked back tears. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We still have to get through this alive." The security team arrived, 2 men in suits who looked more like federal agents than bank security. They flanked our car, eyes scanning the parking lot constantly. One of them tapped on Ms. Clark's window. "Ms. Clark, Ms. Dawson, we're going to escort you to a safe location. Please follow us." We followed their black sedan out of the parking lot, through the city, to a nondescript office building downtown. They led us inside, up an elevator, to a conference room with no windows and heavy security. "You'll be safe here," one of them said. "We've already contacted the FBI field office. An agent is on their way." I sat down, the box still in my lap, and tried to process everything. Just yesterday, I'd been homeless, humiliated, convinced my life was over. Now I was hiding from killers, waiting to hand over evidence to the FBI, sitting on a fortune I'd never known existed. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a call from a number I recognized.
Derek.
I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. But something made me answer. "What do you want?" His voice was different than I'd ever heard it. Not the cruel mockery from yesterday. Not the fake charm he'd used when we first met. This was cold. Flat. Dangerous. "You made a mistake, Ariel. You should have stayed down. You should have taken the scraps I gave you and disappeared. You knew." My voice shook with anger. You knew about my father. You knew about the money.
That's why you married me, isn't it?
You were sent to watch me. He laughed, a sound devoid of humor. You were always so naive. You really thought I loved you? You were a job. A boring, tedious job that was supposed to end years ago, but your father was too smart, too careful. And then you were too pathetic to be worth the effort. Each word was a knife, but I refused to let him hear me break. The FBI is coming, Derek. It's over. It's not over until I say it's over. You have something that belongs to my family. That evidence? It names names, including people very close to me. Hand it over, and maybe you get to live. Go to hell. I hung up.
Ms. Clark was staring at me.
That was him. He confirmed everything. He's part of this. He knows about the evidence. I looked at the box. Ms. Clark, who else knew about this vault? Her face went pale. Only a handful of people. The vault facility, the bank's executive team, and she trailed off. And anyone your father might have told before he died. My mother, I whispered. She's on the list. She knew about the money. What if she told someone? Before Ms. Clark could answer, one of the security guards burst into the room. We need to move.
Now.
There's been a breach in the building. My heart stopped. What kind of breach? Someone bypassed security on the 3rd floor. We don't know how many or who, but we can't risk staying here. Ms. Clark grabbed my arm. Is there a back way out? Service elevator. Come on. We ran. The box banged against my hip as I clutched it tightly, following the guard through a maze of corridors I'd never remember. Behind us, I heard shouting. Heavy footsteps. They were inside. The service elevator was old, slow, creaking as it descended. Every second felt like an eternity. The guard had his gun drawn, aimed at the doors, ready. When we get to the ground floor, there's a delivery door that opens to the alley. My partner is bringing a car around. You run, you get in, you don't stop. Understand? I nodded, too terrified to speak. The elevator jerked to a halt. The doors opened. The guard looked out, gestured for us to follow. We ran down a dingy hallway that smelled like garbage and cleaning chemicals toward a metal door with an exit sign. The guard pushed it open, and sunlight blinded me for a moment. The alley was narrow, lined with dumpsters. A car was waiting, engine running. We were almost there when a figure stepped out from behind a dumpster.
Derek.
He looked nothing like the man I'd married. This Derek wore all black, his expression hard, his eyes empty. And in his hand was a gun. I told you to hand it over, Ariel. The security guard raised his own weapon. Put the gun down.
Now.
Derek smiled. You're outnumbered. 2 more figures emerged from the shadows. One I didn't recognize. The other made my blood run cold. Victor Hargrove. My mother's boyfriend. The man my father had warned me about. Hello, Ariel, Victor said pleasantly, like we were meeting for coffee. Your father was a brilliant man. Too brilliant for his own good. Let's not make the same mistake. Give us the box, and we'll let you go. You killed his partner, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. You're not letting anyone go. Victor shrugged. Richard was careless. He threatened to expose business practices that were perfectly legal, just unethical. We couldn't allow that. Perfectly legal? I held the box tighter. Bribing officials? Falsifying safety reports? People could have died because of your corner cutting. People die every day, my dear. It's called acceptable risk. The security guard's gun never wavered. Last warning. Drop your weapons. Derek raised his gun, pointing it directly at me. Last warning to you. Drop the box. Everything happened at once. The guard fired. Derek dove behind a dumpster. Victor's associate lunged forward. Ms. Clark grabbed my arm and pulled me back toward the door, but it had locked behind us. We were trapped. More gunshots. The sharp crack of bullets hitting metal. I hit the ground, the box beneath me, praying the hard drives inside wouldn't shatter. Then sirens.
Lots of them.
Police cars screeched into the alley from both ends, blocking the exits. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, shouting commands I couldn't process through the ringing in my ears. Victor raised his hands immediately, the practiced gesture of someone who knew when he was beaten. Derek hesitated, looked at me with pure hatred, then dropped his gun and surrendered. The security guard was on the ground, bleeding from his shoulder, but alive. His partner was calling for an ambulance, applying pressure to the wound. Ms. Clark helped me to my feet. My entire body was shaking. A woman in an FBI jacket approached, her ID held up. Ms. Dawson? I'm Special Agent Rivera. I believe you have something for us. I handed her the box with trembling hands. The FBI field office was nothing like I'd imagined. It wasn't the sterile, high-tech environment from movies. It was just another office building, with fluorescent lights and worn carpet and the smell of burnt coffee. But the agents who questioned me were exactly what I'd expected: sharp, focused, missing nothing. Special Agent Rivera sat across from me in a small interview room, a recorder on the table between us. Ms. Clark sat beside me, her presence the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. Let's start from the beginning, Agent Rivera said. Her voice was calm, professional, but I could see the intensity in her eyes. She knew this was big. When did you first learn about your father's involvement with Dawson Meridian Engineering? I told her everything. The eviction, the bank card, the vault, the evidence my father had hidden. With each detail, Agent Rivera's expression grew more serious. And Derek Morrison, your ex-husband, he threatened you? He said the evidence belonged to his family, that it named people close to him. I paused. My father warned me about him. In a letter dated 5 years ago, before I ever met Derek. He said if Derek entered my life, I should be cautious, that he might be planted. Agent Rivera exchanged a glance with her partner, a younger agent named Chun who'd been taking notes. Your father was right to be concerned. Derek Morrison is the stepson of Victor Hargrove, who has been on our radar for years. Hargrove is a fixer, someone who makes problems disappear for wealthy clients. We've suspected his involvement in several cases, but never had enough evidence to proceed. Until now, Agent Chun added. The contents of that box, Ms. Dawson, you have no idea what you've handed us. Financial records linking Hargrove to multiple shell companies. Audio recordings of bribes being negotiated. Emails discussing the sabotage of Richard Meridian's vehicle. My stomach turned. They really did kill him. It wasn't an accident. No, it wasn't. And your father knew. He gathered all this evidence with Meridian, but after Meridian's death, he was too frightened to come forward. He was protecting you. By lying to me my entire life? The words came out more bitter than I intended. Agent Rivera's expression softened slightly. By keeping you invisible. If you'd grown up wealthy, attended private schools, lived in a mansion, they would have seen you as leverage. A target. Instead, you were just another middle-class kid from a rental house. No one paid attention to you. Until I activated the account.
Yes.
That sent up a flag. Hargrove has connections everywhere, including, we suspect, inside financial institutions. Someone alerted him the moment your father's dormant account became active. I thought of the black SUV following us. The breach in the office building. Derek knowing exactly where to find me. So, what happens now? Now, we build a case. The evidence you provided is substantial, but we need to verify it, authenticate it, make sure it'll hold up in court. That takes time. She leaned forward. In the meantime, you're in danger. Hargrove's operation is extensive. He has resources, connections, people willing to do whatever he asks. You're saying they'll come after me again. I'm saying it's likely. Which is why we'd like to offer you protective custody. A safe house, 24-hour security, until we can arrest everyone involved. I looked at Ms. Clark, who nodded encouragingly. But something inside me resisted. How long would that take?
Weeks.
Maybe months. So, I'm supposed to hide for months? Give up my life completely. Agent Rivera's expression was sympathetic but firm. Ms. Dawson, these people tried to kill you today. They won't stop just because we arrested Derek and Hargrove. There are others. People we haven't identified yet. Until we dismantle the entire network, you're at risk. I knew she was right. But the thought of hiding, of letting fear control me, made me feel sick. My father had hidden his entire life. I didn't want that for myself. What if I don't go into protective custody? Agent Chen spoke up. Then we strongly advise you to take precautions. Vary your routes, stay in public places, hire private security. Don't go home, wherever home is, because they'll be watching. And don't trust anyone you don't absolutely have to. I need to see my mother, I said suddenly. She's on my father's list. She knew about Hargrove. I need to know what she told him. Agent Rivera frowned. Ms. Dawson, that's not advisable. If your mother has been sharing information with Hargrove, then I need to hear it from her. I need to know if she sold me out. The agents exchanged another glance. Finally, Agent Rivera nodded. We can arrange a supervised meeting, but you'll be wearing a wire and we'll have agents nearby. If this goes wrong. It won't, I said, with more confidence than I felt. My mother lived 40 minutes outside the city, in a small house she shared with Victor. Or what used to be Victor's house. I supposed he'd be going to prison soon. The thought gave me a grim satisfaction. Agent Chen drove me in an unmarked car while 2 other agents followed at a distance. I wore a small microphone clipped inside my jacket, barely visible. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. You don't have to do this, Agent Chen said as we pulled onto my mother's street. We have enough evidence already. Your mother's involvement. I need to know, I interrupted. I need to hear her say it. He nodded and parked down the block. We'll be listening. Any sign of trouble, we move in. Understood. I got out of the car and walked toward the house where I'd spent occasional awkward holidays and forced family dinners. The garden was overgrown, the paint peeling. Nothing about it felt like home. I knocked. Waited. Knocked again. The door opened, and my mother stood there in her bathrobe, a glass of wine in her hand despite it being barely noon. She looked older than I remembered, tired, her eyes red-rimmed.
Ayo.
She didn't sound surprised. I wondered when you'd show up. Can I come in? She stepped aside without a word. The house smelled stale, like cigarettes and desperation. I followed her into the living room, where she collapsed onto the couch and took a long drink of wine. Victor's been arrested, she said flatly. I assume that's your doing. It's the FBI's doing. I just gave them the evidence. She laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Of course you did. Saint Ariel, doing the right thing, just like your father. You knew. I stayed standing, refusing to sit. You knew what Victor was involved in. You knew about Derek. And you let it happen anyway. Let it happen? She looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. I tried to warn you about Derek. I told you not to marry him. You told me he was trouble. You didn't tell me he was a plant sent by your boyfriend to spy on me. She flinched. I didn't know. Not at first. But you figured it out. A long silence. She drank more wine. Victor and I started dating about 6 years ago. He was charming, successful, attentive. Everything your father wasn't. He knew how to make me feel special. When did you tell him about Dad's money? Another flinch. About a year in. We'd been talking about getting married, and I thought he deserved to know that my ex-husband was secretly wealthy, even if none of it was legally mine. She set down her glass with a shaking hand. He got very interested after that. Started asking questions. About your father's business, his partners, his investments. I didn't think anything of it. You didn't think anything of it, I repeated, my voice rising. Or, you didn't want to think about it because you were getting what you wanted? What I wanted? She stood up, anger flashing across her face. What I wanted was the life I should have had. The money your father hid from me, that he put in your name like I was nothing. Do you know how that felt? To raise you in that tiny house, pinching every penny, while millions of dollars sat in an account I couldn't touch. He was protecting us. He was controlling us. He made every decision, hid every truth, and then he died and left you everything while I got nothing. She was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. So, yes, when Victor showed interest in your father's past, I told him what I knew. And yes, when he suggested that Derek might be a good match for you, I didn't discourage it. Because I thought maybe, finally, I'd get what I deserved. The room felt too small, too hot. I could barely breathe. They killed Richard Meridian. They sabotaged his car. And you helped them get close to the evidence that could have proven it years ago. I didn't know about any of that. Her voice broke. I swear, Ariel, I didn't know they'd killed anyone. I thought it was corporate espionage, maybe some shady business deals. I didn't know. But you suspected. And you did nothing. She collapsed back onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. What was I supposed to do? I'd already told Victor everything. If I tried to warn you, tried to warn your father, he'd have cut you off completely, I finished. And you couldn't risk that. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks, and I saw not my mother but a stranger. Someone who'd chosen comfort over courage, security over truth. Someone who'd sold out her own daughter for the promise of a share in money she was never entitled to. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Ariel. Are you? Or are you just sorry you got caught? She had no answer. I turned and walked toward the door. My hand was on the knob when she spoke again. Your father loved you more than anything. I hated him for it sometimes. He'd have died for you. And in a way, I guess he did. I looked back at her, this woman who'd given birth to me but had never really been a mother. He didn't die for me. He lived for me. He built something and protected it and made sure I'd be okay when he was gone. That's what love is. Not whatever this is. I walked out and didn't look back. Agent Chen was waiting by the car. He didn't ask how it went. He'd heard every word through the wire. He just opened the door and drove me away. My phone buzzed as we headed back to the city. A text from an unknown number, but I knew it wasn't Derek this time. We know where you are. We know what you've done. This isn't over. I showed Agent Chen. His jaw tightened. We need to get you to a safe house.
Now. No.
I was surprised by the firmness in my own voice. No more running. No more hiding. These people have controlled my entire life without me even knowing it. My father spent years afraid. My mother sold me out for money. Derek pretended to love me while spying on me. I'm done letting them have power over me. Ms. Dawson, take me to my father's house. His real house, wherever that is. The one he actually owned. I want to see it. Agent Chen looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have convinced him. He made a phone call, spoke quietly to someone, then nodded. Okay, but I'm coming with you. And so is backup. We drove for an hour, out of the city, into the countryside. The house sat at the end of a long, tree-lined driveway, a beautiful Victorian with wraparound porches and large windows. Nothing ostentatious, but comfortable.
Real.
The kind of home my father had probably dreamed of giving me. Agent Chen cleared the house first, making sure it was secure. Then he let me inside. It was furnished but felt unlived in, like a museum exhibit. I walked through rooms filled with my father's things, his books, his photographs, his life. A life I'd never known. In his study, I found a locked drawer in the desk. The key from the cardboard box fit perfectly. Inside were more letters, more documents, and one final envelope addressed to me. If you're reading this, it began, then you've chosen to fight. I'm proud of you, but be careful. There's one more thing you need to know. The evidence I left you is important, but it's not the only copy. I sent another set to someone I trust, someone who worked with Richard and me, who knows everything. If anything happens to you, they'll make sure the truth comes out. Her name is Dr. Sarah Chen. She's a journalist. Find her. She'll help you finish this. A journalist. Someone who could expose everything, who could make sure the story got told even if the FBI's case fell apart. I took a photo of the name and address, then called Agent Chen into the room. I need to find someone, I said. And then we're ending this. Dr. Sarah Chen's office was in a nondescript building downtown, the kind that housed dentists and accountants and lawyers. Her door had a simple nameplate: Investigative Research Consulting. The perfect cover for a journalist who specialized in exposing corruption. Agent Rivera had insisted on coming with me this time, along with Agent Chen and 2 other agents who waited in the hallway. They'd verified Dr. Chen's identity, run background checks, confirmed she was who my father's letter claimed she was. But even with all those precautions, my hands still shook as I knocked on the door.
Come in.
Dr. Chin was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and gray streaks in her black hair. She looked up from her computer, and her expression shifted immediately from polite professionalism to shock. "Oh my God, you're Michael's daughter. You knew him." "I worked with him and Richard for 3 years. We were building the case together." She stood up, came around the desk, and shocked me by pulling me into a brief hug. "I'm so sorry about your father. He was a good man. He was scared, but he was good." Agent Rivera cleared her throat. "Dr. Chen, I'm Special Agent Rivera, FBI. Ms. Dawson has come into possession of evidence her father left for her. Evidence related to Richard Meridian's death and corruption at Dawson Meridian Engineering." Dr. Chen's expression went from warm to intensely focused. "You opened the vault." "There were 2 vaults," I said. "I found evidence in the second one. My father said you had copies."
Ida.
"I've had them for 8 years, waiting for the right moment to publish. But I needed something to corroborate them, something beyond Richard's and Michael's word. Corporate documents, financial records, recordings." She looked at me hopefully. "Did your father leave those?" "All of it. The FBI has it now." Dr. Chen's eyes actually welled up with tears. "Then we can finally do this. We can finally tell Richard's story. And Michael's." Over the next hour, Dr. Chen laid out everything she knew. She'd been an investigative journalist specializing in corporate fraud when Richard had first approached her, nervous, frightened, but determined. He'd shown her evidence of systematic corruption at Dawson Meridian, bribes paid to government officials to secure contracts, safety inspections falsified to cut costs, inferior materials used in critical infrastructure. "The bridge that collapsed in Minnesota 10 years ago," Dr. Chen said quietly. 12 people died. The investigation said it was a design flaw, but Richard knew the truth. Dawson Meridian had used substandard materials to increase profit margins. Richard had the invoices to prove it. I felt sick. My father was part of this?
No.
Your father was horrified when he found out. He and Richard tried to fix it internally first, tried to force the company to do the right thing. But they were outvoted by the board, and the other major investors shut them down. So Richard decided to go public.
She paused.
2 weeks later, his car went off the road. "Brake failure," they said. But Richard was a mechanical engineer. He maintained his car meticulously. "There's no way his brakes just failed." "Hargrove," Agent Rivera said. "We found emails in Ms. Dawson's evidence discussing Richard's accident." "Hargrove arranged it." Dr. Chen nodded grimly. "Michael knew. He was terrified. He came to me, gave me copies of everything, and told me to sit on it. Wait until it was safe. But it was never safe. And then he got sick, and then he died, and I thought..." She looked at me. "I thought the story died with him. But he'd planned for this. He'd set everything up so you'd find it, so you'd bring it to light." "Why me?" The question burst out before I could stop it. "Why not just give it to you, or to the FBI? Why make me do this?" "Because you're his daughter. Because your name on the case means something. It means Michael Dawson's legacy isn't just about hiding and fear. It's about courage. About doing the right thing even when it's dangerous." Dr. Chen smiled sadly. "He wanted you to be the one to finish what he and Richard started. He wanted you to be the hero he couldn't be." The weight of that settled on my shoulders. My father's last gift wasn't just money. It was purpose, responsibility, a chance to make his life mean something beyond fear. "What do we do now?" I asked. Dr. Chen looked at Agent Rivera. "I publish. With the FBI's permission, I write the story. I name names, show the evidence, tell the world what really happened to Richard Meridian and why Michael Dawson spent his life hiding. And I make sure everyone knows that Ariel Dawson is the one who brought the truth to light." Agent Rivera considered this. "We'd need to coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The timing has to be right. We can't jeopardize the criminal case." "How long?" I asked. "A few weeks. Maybe a month. We need to make more arrests first, secure the evidence, build an airtight case. She looked at me seriously. And in that time, Ms. Dawson, you need to stay safe. Once this story breaks, you'll be even more of a target. Then we move fast, I said. We make the arrests, we publish the story, and we end this before they have time to regroup. Dr. Chen smiled. You sound just like your father. That's exactly what he'd say. The next 3 weeks were a blur. FBI raids across 5 states. Arrests of corporate executives, government officials, fixers like Hargrove. Each arrest revealed more connections, more corruption, a web that stretched further than anyone had imagined. Derek tried to cut a deal, offering to testify against Hargrove in exchange for a reduced sentence. I watched his deposition via video feed, Agent Rivera sitting beside me. He looked diminished somehow, smaller than I remembered, stripped of the arrogance and cruelty that had defined him. I was told to get close to her, he said on camera, his voice flat. Make her trust me, marry her if necessary. Find out what her father knew, what he might have told her. Victor said it would be easy money. Just keep tabs on some nobody whose dad had something Victor wanted. And when Michael Dawson died, the prosecutor asked. Victor got worried. Said the old man might have left information behind, might have set up contingencies. He wanted me to stay close to Ariel, make sure she didn't find anything. But after a few years, it seemed like there was nothing to find. She was clueless.
Broke.
Victor lost interest, said to cut her loose. So you evicted her?
Yeah.
He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. I was done playing house with her anyway. She was pathetic. I watched him say those words, and I felt nothing.
No anger, no hate.
Just pity for the empty, small person he'd always been. Hargrove, by contrast, maintained his innocence to the bitter end. His lawyers filed motion after motion, trying to suppress evidence, trying to get charges dismissed. But the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records,
Audio recordings,
testimony from former employees who'd finally found the courage to speak. And then there was Richard Meridian's car. The FBI had found it in an impound lot, scheduled for destruction. Dr. Chen's investigative work had tracked it down years ago, but without a criminal investigation, she hadn't been able to access it. Now they could. And when forensic specialists examined the brake system, they found evidence of tampering. Precise, professional, exactly the kind of sabotage that could be made to look like mechanical failure. Richard had been murdered, and now we could prove it. For weeks after I'd walked into that bank with my father's card, Dr. Chen published her article. It ran in a major national newspaper, front page, with a photo of my father and Richard standing together at a construction site, both smiling, both young and hopeful. The whistleblowers, how 2 engineers uncovered massive fraud and paid the ultimate price. The article laid out everything: the corruption, the cover-ups, the murder, and my role in finally bringing it all to light. My phone exploded with calls and messages. News outlets wanting interviews. Lawyers offering their services. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly very interested in my life. I ignored most of them. But I did agree to one interview with Dr. Chen on camera to tell my father's story in my own words. Michael Dawson was a hero, I said, looking directly into the camera. He was flawed, and he was scared, but he did what was right. He protected the evidence, he protected me, and he made sure the truth would come out eventually. This is his legacy. Not the money, not the business. The truth. The interview went viral. Within days, there were calls for congressional investigations, for regulatory reforms, for accountability. Dawson Meridian's stock crashed. The company filed for bankruptcy. Executives resigned or were fired. The bridge project that had been awarded using Hargrove's bribery scheme was shut down for safety review. And through it all, I stayed in my father's house, protected by FBI agents, watching the dominoes fall. The federal courthouse was packed. Media cameras lined the steps outside, reporters jockeying for position. I'd avoided them all morning, entering through a side entrance with Agent Rivera and Dr. Chen flanking me like bodyguards. Victor Hargrove's trial had taken 4 months to get to court. 4 months of jury selection, pre-trial motions, legal maneuvering. But finally, today, closing arguments. And I've been called to observe by the prosecution, a symbolic gesture, the daughter of the man who'd gathered the evidence that would finally bring Hargrove down. I sat in the gallery, hands folded in my lap, watching Hargrove at the defense table. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and shackles. His lawyers had tried everything to keep the evidence out, to discredit my father's documentation, to paint him as a disgruntled former partner with an axe to grind. It hadn't worked. The prosecutor stood, a sharp woman named Margaret Torres who'd built her career on taking down white-collar criminals. She walked the jury through the evidence one final time. The financial records showing bribes, the audio recordings of Hargrove discussing problems that needed to disappear, the forensic evidence from Richard Meridian's car, the testimony from former associates who'd turned state's evidence. Victor Hargrove orchestrated murder, she said clearly. He ordered the death of Richard Meridian because Mr. Meridian threatened to expose a system of corruption that had made Hargrove and his associates very wealthy. And he would have gotten away with it, if not for Michael Dawson's courage in preserving the evidence and his daughter Ariel's bravery in bringing it to light. All eyes turned to me. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, my heart was pounding. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was swift and decisive. Guilty on all counts. Hargrove's face went pale. His lawyers immediately filed notice of appeal, but it didn't matter. He was going to prison for the rest of his life. Derek's trial came 2 weeks later. His sentence was lighter, 15 years, with possibility of parole, in exchange for his testimony against Hargrove. I didn't attend. I'd said everything I needed to say in my victim impact statement, read by the prosecutor while I waited outside. Derek Morrison entered my life as a lie, I'd written. He pretended to love me, married me, gaslit me, and ultimately betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. But he also inadvertently gave me the push I needed to discover the truth about my father and to finish the work that good men died trying to do. I don't forgive him, but I don't need to. His punishment isn't about me anymore. It's about justice. My mother never faced charges. The FBI determined she'd been used, manipulated, but hadn't been directly involved in any criminal activity. She called me once after Hargrove's conviction, crying, apologizing, begging for forgiveness. I'd listened in silence, then said, "I need time." "How much time?" "I don't know. Maybe forever." I hung up. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Maybe I never would be. But I could leave that door open, just a crack, for the person I might become someday. The money was still there, of course. My father's fortune, now legally and unquestionably mine. The lawyers had sorted through the trust, the investments, the properties. I was, by any measure, wealthy beyond anything I'd ever imagined. I could have done anything. Traveled the world. Bought a mansion. Lived a life of leisure. But that wasn't what my father had died for. That wasn't what Richard had been killed for. I established a foundation in their names, the Dawson Meridian Whistleblower Protection Fund. It provided legal support, financial assistance, and security for people who came forward to expose corporate fraud and corruption. People like my father, who wanted to do the right thing but were terrified of the consequences. Dr. Chin joined the board. So did Agent Rivera after she retired from the FBI. So did several other journalists, lawyers, and activists who believed in the mission. We funded investigations. We protected families. We made sure that people who spoke truth to power didn't have to face it alone. And slowly, carefully, I rebuilt my own life. I kept my father's house, the Victorian with the wraparound porch. I turned a study into an office where I managed the foundation's work. I planted gardens, adopted a dog, learned how to be alone without being lonely. Ms. Clark became a friend, a real one. She left the bank and joined the foundation as our financial director, bringing her expertise and her fierce loyalty to the cause. I started therapy, working through the betrayal, the loss, the complicated grief of loving a father who'd lied to me even while protecting me. And I started writing. Not for publication, just for myself. My story. My father's story. The truth I'd discovered, and what it had cost. 1 year after I'd walked into that bank with my father's card, I returned for the first time. Not to access accounts or gather evidence, but just to visit. Mason, the young teller who'd first processed my card, recognized me immediately. "Miss Dawson, it's good to see you." "You too, Mason. How have you been?"
Good.
"Really good. That story you helped expose, it's all anyone talked about for months. You did an amazing thing." My father did an amazing thing. I just finished it. I walked through the bank, remembering that moment when everything had changed. When the computer had beeped its alarm, when Miss Clark had emerged from the back office with wide eyes, when I'd first seen those impossible numbers on the screen. It felt like a lifetime ago. It felt like yesterday. I found Miss Clark at her old station. She'd come back to visit too, nostalgic for the place where it had all begun. "I was just thinking about that first day," I said. She smiled. "When you walked in looking like you hadn't slept in a week, clutching that card like it was a winning lottery ticket?" "Was that really only a year ago?" "A year, 1 week, and 3 days. But who's counting?" She linked her arm through mine. "Come on. Let me buy you coffee. We can toast to your father, and to finishing what he started." We walked out of the bank together, into sunshine, into a future that my father had built for me, but that I'd chosen for myself. That night, I returned to his study and read his first letter again. The one that had been waiting in the vault, explaining everything, warning me, trusting me. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become, even though I won't be there to tell you in person." "I hear you, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "I finally hear you." I locked the letter away carefully and turned off the lights. Tomorrow, the foundation would announce funding for 3 new investigations. Tomorrow, I'd meet with a journalist who'd uncovered fraud at a pharmaceutical company and needed protection. Tomorrow, I'd continue the work. But tonight, I let myself rest. Let myself feel proud. Let myself believe that maybe, finally, the truth had been enough. My father had left me more than money. He'd left me purpose. He'd left me courage. He'd left me the chance to turn his fear into action, his hiding into revelation, his death into meaning. And I'd taken it. The useless junk Derek had thrown at me, the card, the wallet, the key, had opened doors I'd never known existed, had shown me who I really was, had given me the power to change things. It turned out Dad had left me everything that mattered, and I'd made sure it counted. If someone you loved had been living a double life to protect you, would you rather have known the truth or lived peacefully in the lie? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about family secrets, betrayal, and the courage it takes to face the truth.